straight over now to the Director for the Centre for Migration Control, Robert Bates. Hi, Robert.
Good evening, Kev. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, mate. Well, look, I've just been talking to Danny Kruger. The sheer scale of the number of migrants that have been coming across the channel since Saturday is phenomenal. We expect that by tomorrow, in 5 days, it will have been more than 2,000. So far since Saturday, 1,899. So the one in, one out deterrent, not exactly firing on all cylinders, is it? Now, let's talk about what Starmer's been up to since his speech, his rallying cry to the Labour faithful at the Labour conference. He went on the media today, the Today programme on Radio 4 and other outlets, and he said that Nigel Farage is to blame for the migrant crisis because it's Brexit that is causing this problem, this crisis. And that's because Brexit took Britain out of the Dublin Convention. The Dublin Convention, while we were in the EU, did indeed allow us to return asylum seekers to the EU, and they could return theirs to us. Now, that's just a lie. I mean, yes, we're out of the Dublin Convention. I'll give you an example. In 2018, for example, Britain asked to return 5,500 asylum seekers to Europe under the Dublin Convention. Europe agreed to 209 of them. So in an entire year under the Dublin Convention, we returned to Europe, to the EU countries, 209 asylum seekers. Meanwhile, under the terms of that same convention, the UK was forced to accept 1,215 migrants back from EU countries. So there you have it. That year we were sort of in deficit, if you like, to the tune of 1,000 migrants. So the Dublin Convention never ever did allow us to advantageously return our migrants to Europe, because in fact we ended up with more. So when he cites the Dublin Convention, it's either due to sheer ignorance or more likely he's just lying. And incredibly, because he says, well, without Brexit we'd have still been in the Dublin Convention and everything would have been fine, we'd have been, you know, solving the migrant crisis wouldn't exist. And because of that, he is now dubbed the dinghies that are coming across right now in their droves from France Farage boats. Who does he think he's kidding?
Yeah, he's a barefaced liar, and he's lost his mind over the last couple of days, of course, not just on this, but when it comes to talking about reforms, indefinitely to remain policy as well. So this is a man that spent pretty much the entirety of the 2016 to 2019 period vociferously campaigning against Brexit. It is pretty much the very core of who he is as a politician. This is someone that was absolutely obsessed with the Remain campaign and the rearguard Remain campaign even after that referendum. And you're absolutely right to cite those statistics. The Dublin regulations effectively, especially when the migrant crisis really kicked off in Europe after 2015, effectively allowed Europe to use the UK as its dumping ground. We took, under that scheme, almost 3 times as many migrants from Europe as we were actually able to return. And even then, they were small numbers. And as you say, many of our requests were being rejected. And we're now at a point now where the small boats crisis is such a big, salient political issue that Starmer is really desperately tried to link it to an issue where he feels more comfortable, put himself on terrain where he feels like he's able to talk with authority, which is Brexit. I think it's a ridiculously large jump to try and pin in any way, shape or form the explosion of the small boats onto Brexit, because of course they were starting in 2018, whilst despite having voted to leave, we were still a member of the European Union. He's doing all he can to avoid taking any accountability for the proliferation and the explosion of small boats crossings that we've seen under his watch. I think we're about to hit 58,000 have crossed since he became Prime Minister, and they're being put up in hotels across the country at our expense, at the taxpayers' expense. They're committing crimes, sometimes heinous crimes, sometimes allegedly crimes. They're costing us an absolute fortune, and all the while they're being given absolute goodies left, right and centre as well. So the whole system is broken, and I think blaming it on Brexit is really desperately trying to reheat arguments that were won way back 6 years ago now.
So it's just not true that Brexit caused the migrant crisis. It's a preposterous suggestion. It's a preposterous thing to say. And then to label them, I'm not here to sort of eulogise about Nigel Farage, but to try to call these dinghies coming over from France Farage boats, that is desperate stuff, isn't it?
And it's something that no one would believe because it's so palpably ridiculous. And of course, actually what Brexit has done is it's liberated us from the mess that the EU is heading towards with its current asylum pact, which would actually see countries such as Britain, if we were still a member, burdened with even more migrants being sent from those frontier countries on the Mediterranean and in Eastern Europe. There's a whole sort of idea of a greater sharing of the burden. That would actually mean that we were having to take even more from Europe. So in a way, we should actually be thanking Brexit and the liberation of our sovereignty from the EU superstate for delivering us a situation where we're not getting dragged into the mess. Because although we have our own problems on our border, the way things are heading in certain parts of Europe really are disastrous. And I think so long as we manage to make ourselves completely unentailed with whatever is going on there, and this is why the France deal is such a concern, because it seems to be starting to edge us back towards European cooperation. If we can keep ourselves at arm's length from the chaos on the continent, then we've got a better chance of stopping the boats and stopping illegal migration than we would do if we were still in the EU.